Okay, we'll continue now with unit number 6. We're in Perek Gimel, Mishnah Daled. We left off speaking about the Kohen Gadol. He was about to begin the Avodah for Yom Kippur, and we discussed the way that he prepares himself. In particular, at the beginning of this parak, we discussed how he knows when the morning comes, why you have to be so careful, particularly to figure out exactly when the morning is, how you know, and then how do you prepare with tefillah, with immersing in the mikvah to make sure, and as part of the avodah, in order to be tahor. So now we're going to describe the beginning of Perek Daled, the actual process of becoming tahor in the mikvah. The Mishnah says as follows: Sadin shalbutz beino levein ha'am. They would spread a linen sheet between the Kohen, Bein Ha'am, and the people. Obviously, it's for the purposes of tzniut. No one should see when he takes off his regular clothing. That's what he's doing now. Again, he's coming in. This is the beginning of the day, the first act of Avodah that he's going to do on Yom Kippur. So he was wearing what's called Bigdei Hedyot, regular clothing, and he would come in to change into his special Bigdei Kehuna, the begadim, the clothing he's going to wear for the avodah. So before he changes, obviously they would put up a barrier, a curtain, in order that he would have privacy when he would do the tefillah. So pashat, he would take off his own clothing. Yarad, he would go down into the mikvah. V'taval, and he would immerse himself. He would do the tefillah in the mikvah. Allah, he would come up, and nistapeg, and he would dry himself off. Okay, so this is a process that we'll see throughout the day of Yom Kippur, as I believe we discussed last time, that the Kohen Gadol is going to repeatedly go to the mikvah to make himself tahor, and this is the first time he does it in order to start off the day. So at that point, after he goes into the mikvah and he comes up and he dries, heviu lo bigdei zahav. They brought to him golden clothing. For the Kohen Gadol, so the Torah describes the various different clothing of the Kohen Gadol. Parshat Tzaveh discusses it at length. The clothing of a regular Kohen and the clothing of a regular Kohen Gadol. As a general rule, there are 4 types of clothing that a regular Kohen Hedyot, a regular Kohen, wears, and then 4 additional articles of clothing that a Kohen Gadol adds on as well. So the regular clothing that the Kohen Hedyot wears, so that clothing is known as Bigdei Lavan, as the white clothing. That was simple clothing without any gold in it, relatively simple clothing that an average Kohen would wear. The Kohen Gadol would wear, according to most opinions, a little bit complicated, if it would be exactly the same, or if not exactly the same, very similar clothing to the Kohen Hedyot. However, he would add on also Bigdei Lavan, 4 additional articles, Bigdei Zahav, 4 additional articles that were made with at least partially Zahav, partially made out of gold. So, in addition to the regular garments that everyone had, he also had these additional garments made out of gold. The Bigdei Lavan consisted of the michnasayim, the pants that he would wear. Starting with the chutonet, is a tunic, was kind of like a very, very long shirt. Michnasayim are pants. Mitznefet is the hat, and the avnet is the belt. So every Kohen would wear that, and the Kohen Gadol would also wear that, or at least a form of those. And then he would, in addition to those, he would also wear the choshen, which is the breastplate, which is made out of various materials, including gold. He would wear the ephod. The ephod is kind of hard to translate, but it was of the Kohen Gadol's clothing. So Once again, there was the chushen that was special for the Kohen Gadol, the breastplate that he wore with the stones of all the shvatim, the ephod, which there are different opinions exactly what it was, some sort of an apron-like garment with a belt around that had these strips on it that was special for the Kohen Gadol. Again, it had shoulder straps which had golden chains, again, big days to have, the me'il, which he wore on top, made out of tchelet, which also had an element of gold in it, because it's again, these are all the big days zahav. Most of it wasn't, but at least it had some zahav. And the tzitz, which was a golden plate which he wore on his head, that was a golden sort of plate with Hashem's name, Kodesh Hashem, engraved into it, that the Kohen Gadol specifically wear on his head. So those were the 4 extra things that Kohen Gadol wore. So at this point, the beginning of the day, they would bring to him this big day zahav, meaning all the 8 bigadim, and he'd wear everything in full regalia, looking complete like Kohen Gadol, as we're familiar with from pictures. So he'd bring him big day zahav lavash, he'd put them on, b'kidesh yadav v'raglav, and he'd do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, as we discussed earlier. Take water from the kior, pour it onto his hands and his feet, and he was ready to begin the avodah. Those were the 2 steps. So he would go and immerse himself in the mikvah, as well as after putting clothing on, because he had been undressed, he got himself dressed, so then it was still necessary to wash his hands and feet for this extra level of kedusha. At that point, heviulo tatamid, they brought to him the korban tamid. The korban tamid, of course, was brought every single day. It was an animal brought in the morning and in the afternoon. It was the first and the last of the avodot that were done during the day, and during a normal day. So then any kohen could have the possibility of getting the option, if it was his turn, his family's turn, and he was chosen, so he would end up being able to bring the korban tamid. That's what the second parak of this Masechah deals at length that we skipped. But exactly how they would on a normal day determine who brings the korban tamid. But that's on a regular day. But here on Yom Kippur, so the Kohen Gadol must do everything, all the avodah of the day. Those things are special for Yom Kippur, as well as those things that are not, was done through the Kohen Gadol. So they brought him the korban tamid. Kratzo, he would do a sort of shchita on the animal. However, normally the Mishnah would just use the word shchato. However, in this case, he wouldn't do a complete shchita. He would rather do what's called a kritza. In order to do shchita, to make an animal kosher, one must cut the kana and the veshet. The esophagus and the trachea of the animal have to be cut berubo for the majority of them. I mean, you don't have to cut all the way through these 2 essential areas, these 2 essential organs. However, you need to cut most of the way. So in a normal shchita, of course, a kohen would do that. He'd cut all the way. He have it completely separated. The animal will die and be able to take the blood for the rest of the avodah, as we'll see soon. However, here the Kohen Gadol, so because he had a whole day of avodah in front of him and lots of things to do, so they wanted to save up his energy, so he would do a minimal shchita called kratzo, and then merik acher shchita al yado, and someone else would complete this full shchita for him. So in that way, he didn't have to overexert himself. And the Kohen Gadol, part of, as we've already been learning, is the care for the Kohen Gadol. On the day of Yom Kippur was very extreme. We kept him up all night to make sure he remained tahor. Before that, as we learned, that we separated him days and days earlier. And now on the day of Yom Kippur itself, we're going to try to minimize the amount of work that he has to do. So part of that is going to be letting him do part of the shchita, not the entire shchita. Okay, so then the animal is shachted, someone else comes along, finishes the shchita. The next step, kibel et hadam uzrako. He would receive the blood, accepted the blood into a kli, this animal's blood, and then do what is known as rikat hadam. Part of bringing the korban is not just bringing the animal, certainly not just slaughtering the animal, not even bringing the animal, but part of it is the beginning of slaughtering, and then to do what's called rikat hadam, where one first collects the blood, and then takes some of the blood on one's fingers and sprinkles it onto the mizbeach. So that was part of the korban tamid, and that's what the kohen did. He took the blood in and sprinkled the blood onto the mizbeach. which is of course part of the avodah. Then, after doing that, he would move along to the next part of the avodah. Again, all of this is just typical everyday avodah that any Kohen could do on every day. Now the Kohen Gadol is doing it. Nechnas lahaktir ketoret shel shachar. He entered in order to bring the ketoret shel shachar after bringing the korban, really in the middle. As we'll see soon, the korban tamid has not been finished because all the limbs hadn't been brought. He would bring the ketoret for the morning. Ketoret is incense. It's a spice that was brought on coals on a special mizbeach, special area in the Beit HaMikdash, also part of the daily avodah as an offering to Hashem.